the instruction set architecture had been evolved in two different forms. One is reduced instruction set architecture. Okay, it is actually a computer, and complex instruction set computer. So it is like what was the characteristics of the instruction that I am going to fetch or I am going to feed into the processor. Depends on that, it is going to differ. Okay, so RISC, that is RISC, which is going to make use of only simple instructions, whereas CISC, which is going to be CISC, which is going to implement some complex set of instructions. Okay, so it has certain limitations with the size of the instruction it's going to take. It can take only up to 64 to 128 bits of information, whereas more than 500 bits of information can be transferred in case of CISC. Okay, some of the examples is ARM, IBM Power PC, HP RISC architecture. So these are all some examples. And in recent days, later CISC were being adapted by Intel architecture and VAX, which is going to be some commercial computer manufacturing. They have gone with some microprocessor, microcontroller they have started, and later they have transformed all those into digital computer. Okay, so initially Intel was making some small set of microcontroller and microprocessor devices that will be performing by getting some complex instructions as input in order to process the output. Okay, so this is RISC and CISC. So now what is for getting a stored program which has to be processed by the computer. The first solution is von Neumann architecture that we are seeing in the last two classes, and then they have come up with another architecture, that is Harvard architecture. Okay, so von Neumann architecture, how the organization is going to be like, it was developed by John von Neumann, okay, from Princeton University, initially as a research work in Institute of Advanced Sciences. He developed this first digital computer. Okay, as a it is not the first digital computer. After the evolution of storing the data for processing, was the first mission he has been developed. Okay, and later this von Neumann architecture, the problem with here is it has a common storage space for both the program and the instructions to be fetched. Okay, so you have it will be having a common memory space. Okay, and for processing an instruction, it will be fetching the instruction and data from same common memory. Okay, so if it is having a common memory, the problem will be the operating system, the operating processing bandwidth will be very limited. So this was the limitation with this von Neumann architecture. And then they had this is what von Neumann was insisting on. There will be a common memory upon which all other processing will be fetching the data and addresses to and from the memory, and it will process it and it will send it to the IO device. Okay, now inside von Neumann architecture, what was the components which are available? This won't be, all these terms will not be new to you, because in the last class I have discussed about the memory buffer register, memory address register, instruction register, program counter, instruction buffer register, and accumulator. Okay, so these are the main component that will actually responsible for processing any arithmetic operation or any logical operation that can be fetched into the von Neumann architecture. So there will be a common memory, okay, upon which that if I want to load some data, first what it will do, it will consider the program counter and its address will be stored in the memory address register, and then the instruction that I have to pass, that will be going to the instruction buffer register, and the program counter will be having the next instruction that has to be fetched. If I have to do some arithmetic operation, it will send the particular data here. Here the arithmetic and logic unit will compute all the operation, and then it will again come back with the result, and it will return back to the main memory. It will store the data and later it will return to the output operation, that is output device. So this is how a simple von Neumann architecture will be there. The only issue with this von Neumann architecture is there will be a centralized pool of memory. There is no shared memory in von Neumann architecture. Okay. Now what this von Neumann architecture will do? It will do the basic operation of fetch, decode and execute. So what is actually fetch? Okay, it will fetch the instruction that has to be executed. Okay, decode, it will convert the assembly language code which has to be executed into a machine understandable code. Okay, as a mission instruction, and later on it will send the instruction which has to be executed in the main memory. This is what fetch, decode and execute. Okay, it is going to fetch the instruction, it is going to decode the instruction into mission understandable code, and then it will execute from the main memory and will return back the result. So this is what the operation inside the von Neumann architecture. For example, this is a simple assembly level instruction which I am going to give to the computer. So what this is going to do? Add LOCA, R0. So if I am going to represent it as R, that is nothing but a register. Okay. So R0, what actually this particular instruction will do is, okay, it will add the value available in location A. Okay, this is going to be the memory address name. Okay, this is going to be the actual register where some data is going to be available. It is going to add it and then it will store it again in R0 register. Okay, R0 plus R1, the value that is available in R0 and LOCA. Okay, it will do it, and once again it will store it in where? In R0. Okay, so the original contents of LOCA, okay, that particular LOCA register will be preserved. Okay, it is going to be the local. Okay, and then the instruction, the value available inside LOCA is fetched and the operand is going to get added, and finally the result is going to be in register R0. This is some basic assembly language instruction that a computer can decode and execute. Okay, so what it is going to do? It is going to fetch the data available in register R0 and it is going to fetch the data available in location A, and then it will send this data to the arithmetic and logic unit. This ALU will do the arithmetic operation and it will return back the data to this to this same register. Okay, now I will go with some other example. Okay, load LOCA, R1 and add R1, R0. So what is the instruction is going to do? The first instruction is going to transfer the data from the memory location LOCA into the register R1. Okay, and after loading this, it is going to do the addition. Okay, R1 plus R0 it is going to do, and where the return value will be there, if add R1, R0 means the value available in R0 and R1 will be added, and again the data will be stored in R0. So this is how a operation will be happen in using a normal von Neumann architecture. Okay, now coming to the concept of hardware architecture. What hardware architecture was claiming is, it is going to separate the memory. Okay, as memory separately for data, the memory is going to be separately allocated for instruction. Okay, if I am going to combine these two memory as one single common memory, then it is von Neumann. If I am going to have my memory separately for data bus and for instruction bus, then it is called as hardware architecture. Okay, so if I am going to create two different memory, then what I can expect my computer to do is, it is going to do parallel operation, parallel access of data to and from the from the memory to the processor. Okay, so in hardware architecture, this is how the hardware architecture is going to be. It will be looking same as von Neumann architecture. The only difference is you will be having separately a main memory over here in von Neumann architecture, but here also I am having a memory unit, but differently I have the hardware architecture. They have designed like a separate memory is for instructions to get executed, a separate memory for storing and retrieving the data. Okay, so they have designed a separate memory, and as usual all other things will be available inside the CPU as well. So this is what the hardware architecture is going to be. So what is the difference between this von Neumann and hardware architecture? Okay, so here in von Neumann, as I have discussed earlier, memory is going to be common, but in hardware you will be having a separate memory for what? Instruction and data. But here for instruction and data, the memory is going to be common. Okay, and if it is a common, we can expect the buses also to be common, but here the buses are different for memory and instruction. As we have seen here, there is a bus separately for addresses to be coming in and out, data buses for available to and fro from the CPU to the data memory as well. So we can't expect a common bus. They are having individual buses for data and instruction. They have 2 clock cycles required to compute or execute an instruction, because it has to fetch the data and then it has to do the next decode operation. Everything has to be done in sequential. So it needs 2 clock cycles, but here since it is going to be parallel, it will be requiring only 1 clock cycle for executing an instruction. Okay, so it is going to be simple. Anyhow, the hardware architecture is going to be little bit complicated because of parallel processing. So if I'm going to say about this von Neumann architecture, is going to be sequential, but this is going to be parallel or pipelined. Okay, pipelined means at the same time n number of instructions is going to get executed in parallel. Okay, so now today we will see about the performance of a processor. So far we have seen many processors, we have seen the architectures. Now I am going to explain about the how the processor's performance can be evaluated. Okay, for example, you have been a student. Okay, if I am giving you some question, okay, to answer, how I can evaluate you? I can evaluate in such a way how correctly you are providing me an answer, or otherwise I can check for how fast you are giving the answer to the question. Okay, in such a way a human can be evaluated. In the same way, a processor can be evaluated. Okay, the processor can be evaluated in such a way that how quickly it is going to respond. Okay, now if you want to get into detail about the performance of a processor, you should know about all these terminologies. Okay, how fastly, how quickly a computer or a processor can respond to your input. Okay, for that they are going to measure everything, they are going to record everything in the term of clock cycle, clocks, that is the number of clock cycle it actually takes. Okay, and then clock counts it takes, total clock time it takes. Okay, how many cycles of clock it takes for one instruction to complete, what is the total number of instructions are being executed in within that clock cycle period. Okay, and how many millions of instruction a processor can take, how many millions of floating point operation can take. There is difference between two operations. This is normal instructions, but when coming to floating point operation, the architectures that were developed in past days were very much complex in order to process a floating point operation. Okay, so we'll see one by one. So this is example of a machine clock rate. Okay. For example, if I'm going to say it as one clock period, I can say digitally as this as a complete one clock period. Okay. If I want to find out how many clock cycles it takes, I can compute it using the clock rate. Okay. Clock rate is usually measured in megahertz and gigahertz. Okay. So clock cycle it takes for a particular instruction to get executed is equal to 1. This is an inverse of clock rate. Okay. It is an inverse of clock rate. Just wait a minute. என்னம்மா Right, where is okay. So the clock rate I am going to make use of for calculating the time period upon which an instruction is going to get executed. The inverse of clock rate. So how many clocks it actually takes, okay, in order to complete that particular instruction. So clock rate is an inverse of that is a clock cycle is going to be inverse of clock rate. Okay, so we will usually compute this mission clock rate in nanoseconds, in picoseconds or in gigahertz. We will say it as in case of clock rate. So these are all the notations upon which we are going to measure the clock rate. Now a computer clock, okay, its rate is the inverse of clock cycle. Okay, now the question for you is, if a computer, okay, if a computer has a clock cycle of 5 nanoseconds, what is the clock rate? Okay, what is the clock rate? You just type the answer in chat box. Okay, yes, if a computer has a clock cycle, can you hear me? Yes, point 2. Yes, Travis has given the first answer, point 2. Yes, any other answers? If a computer has a clock cycle time of 5 nanoseconds, what is the clock rate? 1 divided by 5. Okay, 1 divided by 5 nanoseconds. Okay, 1 divided by 5 into 10 to the power of, yes, point 2. So everyone point 2. Yes, any other answers? Yes, 2 into 10 to the power of 8 hertz. Okay. Any other answers? Any interesting answers from any other students? You just type some answers that comes in mind. You don't want to even calculate, just type it as in the formula 1 divided by. So I have given you the clock cycle time. I am asking you to find out the clock rate. Yes, what about others? Only 10 students are listening to class. Yes. 0.2 into 10 to the power of 9 seconds. Okay, 200 megahertz. Yes, okay. Yes, I think who has given the correct answer? 200 megahertz. Kunal Jaishwal has given the first answer, this correct answer. Okay, then yes, here Shani has given the correct answer. Yes. Okay. Yes. Maurya has given the answer. Yes. Now 200 megahertz is coming in chat box. Okay, fine. Okay. So you can compute the clock rate based on the clock cycle. Okay. The next important metrics that can evaluate the performance of a processor is execution time. Okay, what is an execution time? Here I can say it as a processor or CPU. Okay, I will change it as of then. Okay, so if I am making use of CPU, it also refers to the processor only. Okay, instead the processor. If I am specifically mentioning memory or anything, it differs. Okay. Now, the total time it takes to complete the given instruction. The task is nothing but the instruction that you are going to feed into the computer. Okay, what is the response time? Okay, response time is like the total time which takes in between the initial and the completion of the instruction. That is response time. What is throughput? Okay, before getting into that, we just see this example. Okay, the response time, I can say in case of a car assembly factory, okay, 4 hours is required to produce a car. Okay, so this is the response time. Okay, so throughput is nothing but what are the total number of cars it actually produced. Okay, per hour, that is called as a throughput. Okay, so now coming back to this, what is throughput actually? What is the total number of instruction has been done for the given period of time? It can be a clock cycle or it can be certain period of clock cycle upon which your processor having the ability to complete the task. Okay, so this is what the execution time, response time and throughput. Now how you will define the speed of a processor. Okay, for that with respect to speed, how I can going to compute the performance. Performance of a processor is going to be the reciprocal of the execution time. For example, I have given a question. If the person is going to be giving the answer in the very short execution time, it means what? His performance is very very high. So it is going to be the reciprocal of it. So the maximum performance is going to be computed when there is a very very less execution time of the processor. Now, if I have to compare two processors execution time, okay, in terms of execution time, so how I can do performance of the first processor is going to be the performance of second processor. Now, I'm going to say the performance of X will be calculated by the execution time of X. Performance of Y can be computed by what? 1 divided by execution time of Y. So it goes up. So execution time Y divided by execution time X is equal to N. N is nothing but how fast or how much times the processor X is going to be performing very well when comparing with the performance of Y processor. So this is how I can find out the performance between two different processors. Okay. Now coming to a small question. I'm having a machine, okay, a processor machine, which is going to run a program, set of instructions in 20 seconds. Okay, I have another machine which runs the same program in 25 seconds. Now, you tell me, you type the answer in chat box, how faster machine A is going to be when comparing with B. Then machine B. Yes, type it. Okay, Ayush is saying no problem with the network connection. Okay, you just type the answer. Yes, students, what happened? Type the answer. Yes, Abhinav, yes. 0.8, any other answers? Yes. Yes. 0.8 is 0.8 times faster than yes. I think Abhinav has given the first answer. 25% faster, yes. Jishant has given how much percentage it is? Yes. 0.8, 0.8 times faster. Okay. Any other answers? Yes, simply just type the answer. 1.25, yes. 0.8, yes. Any other answers? Yes. So I want everyone to simply type the answer. That's it. I'm getting only 10 to 15 to 20 people are answering. Okay, 1.25 times faster or 25%. Okay, fine. Yes. So how I will compute it? So simply 25 divided by 20. Okay, 1.25. It is going to be faster. Okay, so it is going to be 25%. Okay, fine. So 25%, 1.25 times it is going to be. So how much? So it is going to be faster than mission A. The next thing is we'll move on to the next performance factors. Okay, CPU execution time. How I can calculate the CPU's execution time for a particular program. Okay, so it is going to be the it is going to be the product of CPU clock cycles for a program into which is a product of clock cycle time it takes or otherwise. So I'm going to mention the formulas which we usually use for calculating the performance for computing the CPU time. In other words, I can say the total number of CPU clock cycles for a program divided by, it is a ratio of clock rate and clock cycle for a program. So using these CPU execution time, you can compute the total time the CPU spends for working on a particular task. The task can be here as a program. So program will have instruction. Okay, so you'll have a task. The tasks are going to be n number of programs, and n number of programs. Each program will have a set of n number of instructions. Each program will have n number of instructions in detail. Okay, now if I go in some other words, how much CPU time for the entire process to get over? Okay, at that time in depth, if I am going to find out CPU time inside a instruction, okay, inside the set of inside a program, what is the CPU time it actually takes? Then I have to do the product of instruction count, okay, cycles per instruction, and then clock cycle, okay, or otherwise it is going to be instruction count multiplied by CPI divided by clock rate. Okay, so in some other terms, if you are having some other related values available for operation, you can give it as instruction divided by program into clock cycle per instruction into seconds per clock cycle. So I can find out the CPU time for each and every program with which set of instruction are going to be there. Okay, so now what is cycles per instruction? So for executing an instruction, you need some set of clock cycles, right? For computing the clocks, the cycles per instruction, what I have to do is I should do the summation over n number of instructions. I have 1, 2, 3 up to n number of instructions I have to complete a program to execute, okay, which is going to be the product of the clock cycles per instruction, that is CPI, into instruction count. Okay, so there is going to be like IC is nothing but the count of the number of instructions which has to be executed. Okay, for example, I is equal to 1. It can be load operation. Load has to be done 5 times. Okay, and for that, for each load, I need some value, some 5 seconds. So 5, for example, I have some 50 clock cycles I need. Okay, for each clock cycle, total number of things is 5 loads are available. So like this. So I have another instruction for loading of for addition operation. I need 20 CPI. Okay, so how many additions are available? 2 additions are available. So I will be adding like this. Okay, so I am going to do the summation of everything for how many values? For n number of classes. I have n number of classes like load, addition, store, okay, addition, store, and then move, okay, shift. Some set of classes of instructions will be there. So for each instruction, I will find out how many instruction cycles it take, and I will multiply it with the how many times I have to do that. Okay, I will show the example so that you will get a clarity about the CPA. Okay, I hope you can see this how you can calculate the CPA. Okay, so you just see what was the problem we have seen here. CPA into IC, that is how many cycles per instruction it takes multiplied by the total count of instruction of that particular class. What the class is: loading, arithmetic logic, some class of operation it is going to do n number of times. Okay, so here the problem is I have to do arithmetic and logic instruction 50% of the time. Okay, here totally I am going to have 100% execution. Okay, for that, for 100% execution of certain program P, I have instructions which involves arithmetic and logic unit instruction which occurs 50% of the time. For each instruction it takes 4 CPI. This is the clock per, that is clock cycle per instruction. Then I have another set of instruction which is of the type loading, which occurs 30% of the time in my program. Okay, for each load operation, how many cycles it takes? 5. So next instruction is I have store instruction inside my program which occurs only 5% of the time, but for each store operation I will take 4 clock cycles. And I have branch instruction which takes 15% of the overall program which occurs 15% of the time, but for branch instruction it takes only 2 clock cycles. So now I have to calculate the total cycles per instruction for the entire program. Now, so how I can do that? I have to use this particular formula, that is CPI is equal to summation of CPI for each instruction into this. This I is nothing but this 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, it is going to be the set of instructions it is involved. So what I have to do, this is going to be 50%. I will convert in range of 1. Okay, so it is going to be 0.5 into 4 plus 0.3 into 5, okay, plus 0.05 into 4 plus 0.15 into 2. So totally my entire program is going to take 4 cycles per instruction. Okay, this is what actually happened in case of calculating the frequency of all the instructions which have been executed in any normal program. Okay, this is an example. This is not a common format or anything. I am just showing some example over there. Now, my another example is going to be millions of instructions per second. If my processor has the ability to process millions of instructions per second, which is otherwise called as MIPS rate. Okay, this has actually been a typical rate where a processor which ability is to process millions instructions per second. Okay, in that case, how I have to calculate the rate at which the processor is going to execute. Okay, this is going to be the I will just straightly come here. It is going to be the ratio of the frequency, that is going to be the clock rate upon which the instruction is going to get executed, divided by CPI into 10 to the power of 6. Okay, otherwise I can say it as IC divided by the time actually taken for execution into 10 to the power of 6. So this is especially they have this is actually the derivation part I have ignored. Okay, but anyhow you can get an idea about how you can calculate MIPS, which can evaluate the performance of a processor whose processing rate is going to be millions of instructions per second. Okay, for example, if for a given processor, we are assuming that what happens if MIPS have been implemented over a normal processor. Okay, so the problem here is, consider the execution of a program which results in the execution of 2 million instructions on a 400 megahertz processor. So we are going to consider this as a MIPS processor. Okay, so I have given the given the percentage. Okay, so I have given the frequency and the cycles. Okay, so the frequencies is going to be the instruction mix, and CPI is going to be the okay, the CPI upon which for each instruction it is going to take, the clocks it is going to take. So as usual, I will compute the CPI. Okay, now what actually we are going to include is, we are going to consider this as a MIPS processor. So we have to calculate the MIPS rate as well. Okay, so for calculating the MIPS rate with respect to CPI, we have a default formula as F divided by CPI into 10 power 6. Okay, so what we are going to do here is, we are going to consider here the frequency of the processor is going to be the processor is going to be 400 into 400 megahertz. So 400 into 10 to the power of 6 divided by what is the other formula? CPI. What is the CPI we have found? 2 into, that is 2.24 into 10 power 6, which is going to be 178. That means it can do 178 okay instructions okay per clock cycle. So this is what a MIPS processor can do, the execution of a program to trace it, and you can experiment over using the MIPS. Okay, now coming to the concept of wait, we have another concept, more M flops will be there. Wait a minute. Okay, so now I think share. Okay, so we have another example that is called as M flops. Okay, so M flops is nothing but, if you're having millions of operations per second with respect to floating point operation, at that time you can make use of M flops. Okay, M flops, for that the wait a minute. Okay, you have M flops is available. So the formula for M flops is number of floating point operation which is available in the program divided by the total execution time into 10 power 6. So here we are going to consider everything in the terms of gigahertz. So for that reason we are going to make use of 10 power 6 over here. So so far what we have seen. Yes, wait. Share. Yes, I hope you can see the slides moving. Okay, in the same way, you have two types of operations. One is millions of instructions per second. Okay, a processor can perform. At the same time, for floating point operation, you have separate processor which is called as M flops. This MIPS and M flops are the performance benchmarking standards which have been communicated, so that the process, millions of instruction processes can be evaluated, that can be executed, which executes actually. Okay, so with this detail I will go into the next topic of how a processor speed can be enhanced and how it can be measured. For example, I'm having a processor which is giving a response for particular clock cycle. Okay, it is executing for 5 seconds. For example, I am saying I'm going to do some enhancement in my processor in such a way that the response time is going to be reduced, which is averagely reduced or ultimately reduced. Okay, in such cases, what I can say, my enhancement is going to make some tuning in my existing process. Okay, so at that time, the concept of Amdahl's law, okay, was proposed by Jenny Amdahl. Okay, so what he has proposed here is going to consider a single processor. Okay, it is going to take the input and it will give some output. Okay, so what he is going to do is he is going to some part of the program is going to get changed. Okay, the fraction of program in inside the entire task is going to change so that its response time can be reduced. That means what? Its performance will be improved. Okay, so I am going to have a processor, okay, which is going to do the task, okay, which is going to be a serial task. Serial means what? One by one it is going to do. Okay, now I am going to include some part of the processor to work into parallel environment. Okay, that means what? N number of new processors have been added so that the task will be quickly done. So at the time, what will happen if I have some f fraction of execution time which has been evolved with a single processor? Okay, I'll have 1 minus f fraction of execution time when these parallel processes are being included. Okay, so he has proposed a formula for the speed up. Okay, Amdahl's law is nothing but he has proposed a formula for this speed up. Speed up is nothing but when I'm going to introduce some parallel processors, okay, which is n processors inside the program, it is going to enhance the performance of the processor. Okay, for example, you have been given a task as an assignment. One person completing one task will be difficult. If I am allowing 5% to complete the same task, what will happen? 5% can divide the task into small subunits and they can complete it and they can merge it and they can submit it very easily. So what happens? The speed up of the task assignment has been improved. In the same way, I am having some set of program, okay, from 0 to n, 0 to n. For example, I am saying I am making all these part as serial part, but this particular part as parallel part. That means n number of processes are going to get introduced to perform this particular operation. So at the time, what happens? With the usual response time that I can find, I can expect some response time which is very quicker when comparing with the previous execution. So that is what Amdahl has proposed. Time to execute the program on the single processor divided by the time to execute the same program on the n parallel processor. So when I am going to introduce an n number of parallel processors, it is going to ultimately increase the speed up of my process in the program. Okay, so he has come up with the final formula as 1 divided by 1 minus f plus f divided by n. Okay, I will share you how we are getting this 1 divided by 1 minus f. Okay, this as a separate file. Okay, it is a lengthy derivation which you can just look at it and you can understand. Okay, anyhow we won't ask derivation for you in any thing, but anyhow you just try to understand how this speed up formula has been arrived. I will share you in the next class. Okay.
Ma'am, it's 452, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, 458. Okay. So we'll wind up the class for today's class. We will continue these in the next class. Okay. Meantime, you just take the, you can open the quiz section. It is assignment section. You can take the quiz and you can go to the next class. Okay. Thank you.
Ma'am, it's showing no assignments. Like in the assignment section, there is no assigned work or something. Excuse me, ma'am.
Check now.
It's coming zero only. Like assigned is zero. Assigned zero funds. Okay, now there is a notification. Yes, yes, ma'am, we got it. Okay.
See those who are available now. Just simply type your register number in chat box and go. Those who are available now, type your register number and go. Okay. Type your register number in chat box and you can leave the meeting. So that based on this type activity, I can find out the attendance. Okay. Type your register number and leave the class. Just make this as a usual practice for the upcoming classes. Everyone type your register number and leave the class. Type your register number fully. Because I can't take the attendance. Anyhow, it is generating some report in Microsoft Teams how many minutes you have you have attended the class. Sometimes some ambiguity is there. I think only 45 members were present today. Okay, thank you.